Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is full of unexpected twists. Some become key turning points of the entire saga, while others remain in the shadows, though they deserve no less attention. We all remember the shocking revelation of Peter Pettigrew disguised as Scabbers, or the moment Mad-Eye Moody turned out to be Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. But there are twists that never received much publicity, even though they are masterfully written and brilliantly woven into the fabric of the story. Today I want to show you exactly those moments. Surprising, subtly prepared, and deeply emotional. Enjoy the video. Number 1. The Overheard Prophecy, Half-Blood Prince. One of the most subtle and tragic twists unfolds in The Half-Blood Prince, when Harry finally learns who delivered the prophecy to Voldemort, the very prophecy that started the entire war. It was Severus Snape. He, the man tasked with protecting Harry, was the one who informed the Dark Lord about the child. This scene casts Snape in a new light. His entire life becomes a quest for redemption in the name of Lily Potter, the woman he loved. A twist not revealed at once, but pages and books later becomes the emotional foundation of the story's final act. Number 2. Lupin is a werewolf, prisoner of Azkaban. Amid the whirlwind revelations at the end of The Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius's innocence, Pettigrew's return, the Time Turner, it's easy to overlook one important detail. Professor Lupin is a werewolf. But if you go back and reread carefully, Rowling left plenty of clues, from Lupin's sudden illnesses during full moons to Snape's suspicious assignment on werewolves. It was all part of a carefully crafted mystery. The twist not only adds depth to Lupin's character, but also explains his poverty and reluctance to form close bonds. Number 3. Umbridge sent the Dementors, Order of the Phoenix. The moment Umbridge finally admits she was the one who sent Dementors, after Harry feels like a stab in the back. Up until then, everyone, including the reader, believed the Dementors had gone rogue or were manipulated by some unseen evil. The truth is revealed almost in passing, but it underscores the monstrous nature of Umbridge. Her actions weren't just cruel. They were calculated and cold-blooded. Even Dumbledore was fooled. The false trail Rowling laid was devilishly convincing. Number 4. The cup was a portkey, Goblet of Fire. The final scene in the maze, where Harry and Cedric grab the Triwizard Cup together, feels catastrophic. The cup is a portkey. It transports them straight into Voldemort's arms. But the truly fascinating part isn't the teleportation itself. It's how it was set up. Earlier in the book, the characters use an old boot as a portkey to travel to the Quidditch World Cup. At the time, it's just another quirky feature of the magical world. But later, that detail explains how and why the cup worked, a beautifully subtle link between the beginning and the end. Number 5. Bathilda is Nagini, Deathly Hallows. Harry and Hermione arrive in Godric's Hollow, searching for answers. They meet Bathilda Bagshot, an elderly historian of magic, who seems strange but not immediately threatening. The reveal that she is, in fact, Nagini, possessed in a corpse, is terrifying. Rowling masterfully builds the suspense, the creaking house, the dim light, the eerie silence, Bathilda's odd behavior. All of it leads to one of the most horrifying and unexpected scenes in the entire series. It's essentially Harry's first real encounter with Voldemort after his return. Number 6. Krum invited Hermione to the Yule Ball, Goblet of Fire. Amid all the drama, tournaments, and mysteries of the fourth book, one of the most charming twists is Hermione showing up at the Yule Ball with Viktor Krum. Until that moment, she had kept her date's identity secret, and Ron, like most readers, assumed she made it up. But when she walks into the hall on Krum's arm, jaws drop. This twist not only serves as emotional relief, but also marks Hermione's growth, confident, independent, and truly admirable. Number 7. Arabella Figg is a squib. For years, Mrs. Figg was nothing but a dull footnote in Harry's life, a neighbour with too many cats, and a house full of cabbage-smelling furniture. The Dursleys sent him there when they wanted him out of the way. "She's mad," Dudley once said. "Talks to her cats, smells like old socks." But in Order of the Phoenix, everything changes. When Dementors attack Harry and Dudley, Mrs. Figg appears from the shadows, not confused or frightened, but furious. "Don't put your wand away, idiot boy," she snaps. And just like that, the mask drops. She's not just an eccentric neighbour, she's a squib, born to wizarding parents with no magic herself, and she's been watching over Harry on Dumbledore's orders since the beginning. Her testimony at Harry's disciplinary hearing helps clear him. No one expected it. A character introduced in Philosopher's Stone returns 5 books later as a key player. Rowling's storytelling shines in moments like this. She reminds us that no detail is wasted, and even the quietest characters can hold great importance when the moment comes. Number 8. Ron becomes a prefect. When Ron Weasley is made prefect in Order of the Phoenix, even Harry is stunned. "Me?" Ron says, disbelieving. "You sure?" And it's not just him. Readers expected Harry to get the badge. He had faced Voldemort, saved the school multiple times, and led every battle that mattered. But Dumbledore saw something else. A boy, always in the shadow, finally stepping forward. The moment stings for Harry. "Why him and not me?" he asks. "I've done more." It's quiet jealousy, raw, human, and new. But Rowling doesn't let that moment fester. Instead, it becomes a window into their friendship. Ron needed that recognition. Always the 6th son, always second best. Being chosen wasn't just a title, it was proof that someone saw value in him as he was. And Harry, though bitter at first, grows from it. He accepts it. The story doesn't crown the obvious hero. It reminds us that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in those still waiting for their chance to be seen. Number 9. Percy betrays his family. Percy Weasley always chased rules like they were written in gold. Ambition burned in him brighter than any family bond. So when the Ministry turned against Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix, Percy didn't hesitate. He sided with the officials, packed his bags and walked out on the burrow. "He's made his choice," Arthur Weasley told Molly, but her silence said more than words. Percy believed Harry was lying about Voldemort. He called his own father disloyal. He stopped answering letters. The Weasley family, always so tightly knit, suddenly had a hole no one could fill. It wasn't until Deathly Hallows that Percy returned. Just before the final battle, he stepped into the room of requirement and said, "I was a fool." He fought alongside his brothers. He stood next to Fred when the walls shook and everything fell apart, and when Fred died, Percy didn't leave his side. He screamed. He refused to move. The war broke his pride, but it brought him home. Percy's betrayal stung not because he was evil, but because he was human. In a world of wands and curses, it was ego and politics that tore a family apart, and love that stitched it back together. Number 10. Grawp is Hagrid's brother. Hagrid's return in Order of the Phoenix brought a strange secret. Deep in the Forbidden Forest, hidden from students and staff, lived Grawp, a full-blooded giant, over 16 feet tall, and Hagrid's half-brother. "I brought him back with me," Hagrid admitted, bruised and beaten. "He's my family." The idea of teaching table manners to a creature who communicated mostly through grunts and fist swings seemed absurd. But behind the chaos was Hagrid's desperate hope to be loved, to not be the only one of his kind in a world that never fully accepted him. Grawp added an unexpected layer to Hagrid's character. The gentle gamekeeper, often seen crying over baby dragons or unjust punishments, suddenly became a brother. He protected Grawp with the same fierce loyalty he gave to Harry. And though Grawp didn't understand much, he tried. He gave Hermione a bicycle handle as a gift. He said her name, Hermie. And when Hagrid disappeared, captured by Umbridge, Grawp wandered through the forest looking for him. It was clumsy, awkward, but filled with heart, the kind of affection only someone like Hagrid could inspire in a creature like Grawp. When the Battle of Hogwarts began, Grawp didn't hide. He fought. Swinging tree trunks and stones, he stood on the side of the school, of his brother, of the students who had once feared him. "Grawpy!" Hagrid called out during the chaos. And Grawp came, roaring, protecting those Hagrid loved. It wasn't just a comic subplot, it was a payoff. The bond Hagrid nurtured in secret became strength on the battlefield. Grawp wasn't just Hagrid's burden, he was his family. And in the end he chose to fight for the only home his brother ever had. At number 11, Lockhart is a fraud. Gilderoy Lockhart sparkled with fame. His books lined the shelves of Flourish and Blots. Titles like Gadding with Ghouls and Break with a Banshee made him a household name. He signed autographs with a flourish and flashed a dazzling smile at every camera. Even Molly Weasley blushed when he appeared, but beneath the golden curls and shining teeth there was nothing. No real courage, no real talent. In the Chamber of Secrets, cornered and desperate, Lockhart finally confesses, "It's all been a dreadful mistake. I'm afraid I didn't do all those things." His weapon was a memory charm. His victims? The true heroes, forgotten and erased. Throughout the year, the signs were there. Lockhart botched every defense lesson, pixies escaped, spells backfired. When Harry broke his arm during a Quidditch match, Lockhart proudly declared he could fix it, only to vanish the bones entirely. "Ah, yes, well that can sometimes happen," he said cheerfully, as Harry stared at his jelly-like arm. And yet people still believed him. That's what made the twist so sharp. It wasn't just that Lockhart was a fraud, it was that everyone wanted his stories to be true. They craved a hero so much, they ignored the truth right in front of them. In the end, his downfall was poetic. He tried to erase the memories of Harry and Ron using Ron's broken wand. The spell rebounded. Lockhart's mind was wiped clean, just as he had done to others. It was justice in its most ironic form. Later, in Order of the Phoenix, we glimpse him again, wandering St. Mungo's hospital, smiling vacantly. Forgotten by the world he once fooled. Lockhart's story is a warning. Fame is fragile, and true greatness is never taken, it's earned. Number 12, Kreacher helped Regulus destroy a Horcrux. Kreacher had always seemed bitter, spiteful, loyal only to the memory of the Black family's twisted pride. But in Deathly Hallows, everything changes. When Harry treats him with kindness, something shifts. The old elf begins to speak, not as a servant, but as someone with a buried story. "Master Regulus was different," Kreacher whispers. "He cared what happened to me." The name strikes a chord. Regulus Arcturus Black, Sirius's younger brother. A Death Eater who turned against Voldemort and paid the price. Years before, Voldemort ordered Kreacher to test a deadly cave filled with enchantments. The potion burned his insides. Alone, weak, Kreacher disapparated back home. No one had expected him to survive, no one except Regulus. And when Regulus understood what Voldemort was hiding there, a Horcrux, he made a choice. He drank the poison himself, gave Kreacher orders to switch the lockets, and died on the shore. He told Kreacher to leave, the elf says, eyes full of pain, and Kreacher had to obey. The locket Regulus retrieved ended up hidden in the Black family home. Without Kreacher, it would have stayed there forever. Without his loyalty to Regulus, without his willingness to help Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the Horcrux might never have been found, and yet no one thought him capable of such bravery. He had been dismissed as useless, as cruel, but he had served with more devotion than anyone knew. In the kitchen at Grimmauld Place, he holds the real locket and speaks Regulus's name with reverence. It's a quiet act of mourning that reshapes how we see him. Kreacher's story isn't just a surprise twist, it's a revelation. That courage wears many faces. that even the smallest, most overlooked beings carry the weight of the world. He is no longer just the muttering servant. He is a link between past and present, between the fall of Regulus and the rise of Harry's final mission. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins, it's Kreacher who leads the house elves into war, screaming for his master, for Regulus, for the boy who saw his worth. Number 13, Neville could have been the chosen one. Neville Longbottom could have been the chosen one. Dumbledore reveals this to Harry in Order of the Phoenix, deep within his office, under the heavy weight of truth. The prophecy made by Sybil Trelawney never mentioned a name, only that a boy would be born at the end of July, to parents who had defied the Dark Lord 3 times. Neville fit that description just as much as Harry did, and yet Voldemort chose Harry. That choice shaped everything. He chose the boy he thought most likely to be a danger to him, Dumbledore says, and in doing so he made you the one. If Voldemort had gone after Neville instead, it could have been him with the lightning scar, not Harry. But fate is not so simple. Neville grew up without fanfare, raised by his strict grandmother Augusta, while his parents, Alice and Frank Longbottom, were tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. He bore his pain in silence. For years, Neville was seen as clumsy and forgetful. Even Professor McGonagall once said, "Why is it always you, Longbottom?" But something changed. With every book, Neville became braver, stronger. In the Deathly Hallows, it is Neville, not Harry, who destroys the final Horcrux by killing Nagini with the sword of Gryffindor. Then Harry saw the sword, Rowling writes, gleaming as Neville Longbottom swung it through the serpent's neck. In that moment, he fulfilled the prophecy in his own way. Neville didn't need to be the boy who lived. He became the boy who stood when no one else could. He grew into a hero, not because of a prophecy, but in spite of it. That's the hidden brilliance of his arc. Being chosen means nothing. Choosing to fight, that's what makes a legend. Number 14. Rita Skeeter's biography of Dumbledore. Rita Skeeter's biography of Albus Dumbledore arrived like a thunderclap. Titled The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, it was released mere days after his death. In the chaos following the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, the wizarding world was grasping for explanations, for comfort, for someone to trust. And then came Skeeter, ever opportunistic, exploiting that vacuum with sharp quills and poisoned ink. Her book didn't just question Dumbledore's legacy, it tore it open. To many, it seemed like scandalous drivel. To others, it whispered a frightening possibility. Had they ever really known their greatest champion? What made this plot twist so underappreciated wasn't its lack of drama or consequence. It was, rather, too uncomfortable. Readers had grown up trusting Dumbledore just as Harry had. They believed in his omniscience, his selflessness, his quiet sorrow. Skeeter's biography made readers recoil. Aberforth's bitter words at the Hog's Head later confirmed more than anyone had wanted to believe. Albus had loved Gellert Grindelwald. He had been tempted by the same kind of power he spent his life opposing. It wasn't the betrayal that stung, it was the realization that Dumbledore's wisdom had been purchased through fire and failure. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Rowling plants this revelation with careful unease. "Changed all right," Aberforth says grimly. "It's true, he never loved power after that. Never." But it is not Skeeter who lies. She exaggerates, yes. She speculates and stings. But within her malice lies a truth that the wizarding world had refused to confront. Dumbledore, Saint of Hogwarts, had once drafted letters about a world order in which wizards ruled muggles for the greater good. He had walked side by side with a boy who would become the darkest wizard of the age, second only to Voldemort. This twist fundamentally alters how we interpret Dumbledore's every action. Suddenly, the man who trusted Snape, who allowed a boy to carry a piece of Voldemort in his soul, who delayed giving Harry the truth, is no longer a perfect strategist. He is a man crushed under the weight of his past, terrified of his own desire to lead. This is what makes his restraint so tragic. and admirable. His choices weren't those of a flawless mentor, they were the carefully measured steps of someone who had already lost everything once before. Dumbledore's history with his sister Ariana is perhaps the most haunting thread Skeeter touches upon. The duel that killed her was a three-way catastrophe between Albus, Aberforth, and Gellert Grindelwald. None of them knew whose spell had struck Ariana down. Dumbledore's silence on the matter was not nobility, it was guilt. For decades he carried that weight alone. It was only through Aberforth that Harry learns the truth. Dumbledore's refusal to speak about Ariana wasn't just repression, it was penitence. Even more disturbingly, Skeeter forces readers to examine Dumbledore's absence from the life of his brother and sister. While Aberforth stayed behind, Albus sought fame, correspondence, and forbidden dreams with Grindelwald. He abandoned his duties in pursuit of a new world. As Skeeter coldly writes, the mother died, and the prodigy flew off from the ashes. In some twisted sense, she captures the bitter resentment of a family left behind. Aberforth's later confrontation with Harry confirms it. "You knew nothing of the man's life," he snaps. And he's right. What this plot twist truly accomplishes is an evolution of Harry's character. For 7 books, Harry had clung to adult figures, Hagrid, Sirius, Lupin, and above all, Dumbledore. But the life and lies of Albus Dumbledore strips that safety net away. Harry is forced to grow up, not by facing Voldemort, but by accepting the moral complexity of the man he trusted most. It's easy to fight evil when it wears a black cloak. But Harry had to continue believing in someone who had once danced with it. Rowling reflects this inner struggle beautifully in Harry's visit to Godric's Hollow. There, at Kendra and Ariana Dumbledore's grave, he is overwhelmed by confusion and pain. He had never known the man who had given him so much. The gravestone reads, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." It's a cruel irony. For Harry, his treasure had been Dumbledore's wisdom. Now it seemed it had been built on secrecy and regret. And yet this revelation never truly destroys Dumbledore's legacy. Instead, it reshapes it into something richer, more human. The narrative allows Dumbledore's greatness to coexist with his flaws. It reminds us that true wisdom is often born from failure, not purity. In this way, Skeeter's sensationalist biography becomes a quiet triumph of the story. It forces readers to question the binary of hero and villain. In truth, Dumbledore had been both, and that is precisely what made him fit to lead. The wand he carried, the Elder Wand, becomes a metaphor for this inner duality. Known as the Death Stick, it was a relic of violence and ambition, and yet Dumbledore, who had once dreamed of dominion, took it not to conquer but to contain. His choice to master the wand without ever using its power offensively reflects the culmination of a man who learned to fear his own capacity to harm. "I was a fool," he admits to Harry after death. "I was a clever boy, but I was not wise." Skeeter's book also reframes Dumbledore's relationship with Harry. He did not raise the boy to be a soldier only. He tried to give Harry a choice, to walk into death with understanding, not just courage. But this decision was rooted in Dumbledore's own failings. He had once allowed a girl to die because he could not choose between his loyalty to family and his hunger for greatness. He would not make the same mistake with Harry. This is why he delayed telling Harry about the Horcrux within him, because he feared he was still the boy who chose power over love. The most powerful moment in the Pensive, when Snape shows Dumbledore the doe-shaped Patronus and Dumbledore whispers, "After all this time?" and Snape replies, "Always," suddenly takes on a new tone. Dumbledore is moved not just by loyalty, but by the realization that others still have the capacity to love where he failed. Skeeter didn't understand that. But readers must. Her book was designed to hurt. But, inadvertently, it reveals the cost of redemption. Number 15, Moaning Myrtle, was the basilisk's victim. Of all the ghosts that drift through the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, none carry their story with such silent tragedy as Moaning Myrtle. She floats in the girls' bathroom on the first floor, often dismissed as a weeping nuisance. Her shrill wails, sudden appearances from toilet bowls, and knack for invading privacy are treated with annoyance or mild amusement. But Myrtle's story is one of sorrow, death, and a haunting link to one of Hogwarts' darkest secrets. She was not just a moody ghost. She was the first victim of the basilisk, the creature unleashed from the Chamber of Secrets by Tom Riddle himself. The revelation comes not with drama but quiet horror. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, after a string of petrifications leaves the school in fear, the trio pieces together a chilling truth. The monster is a basilisk, a serpent whose direct gaze kills. But someone did die 50 years ago, the last time the chamber was opened. The victim, a young Hogwarts student. Oh, no one's died in years, the professors had assured, except for one. Moaning Myrtle, the girl who had haunted the plumbing for decades, was, in fact, the basilisk's original casualty. The weight of this twist is immense, yet Rowling never dwells on it. Myrtle reveals her own death with eerie nonchalance, almost as if she's reliving the trauma in her own loop of misery. I remember seeing a pair of great big yellow eyes floating there in the air. And then I was dead, she tells Harry and Ron. In those lines lies the echo of pure terror, an innocent girl stumbling upon the horror beneath Hogwarts and being slain instantly. She had no warning, no time to run, just the eyes, and death. Myrtle's murder is often overlooked because it happened long before Harry's time. But that murder was what pushed Tom Riddle to frame Hagrid, to build his alibi, to ensure the school would close the chamber before more deaths followed. Myrtle's life became the cost of Riddle's experiment, the proof that the heir of Slytherin could indeed control Salazar's terrible legacy. The tragedy is not just in the death, but in the silence that followed it. A young girl died, and the school moved on. Her story buried beneath half-truths and lies. That Myrtle chose to stay, anchored to the very spot where her life ended, adds another layer to her character. She didn't become a ghost to haunt the world. She remained where her body fell, in the very bathroom where the basilisk emerged. Her spirit, forever trapped in the damp and lonely stall, is not merely tragic, but symbolic. She became a physical embodiment of the chamber's secret, unknowingly guarding the location even as others searched in vain for it. It's telling that Harry finds answers through Myrtle. When Hermione is petrified and clutching a torn page from a library book, it's Myrtle's bathroom that becomes the epicenter of investigation. Hermione had gone there to confirm her suspicions, to make the connection between the monster and the plumbing. The link to Myrtle wasn't accidental, it was vital. Her bathroom was not just a haunting ground, but a clue. The entrance to the chamber lay hidden behind the sink, inches from where Myrtle died, the pipes connected to a snake that had killed her. That Myrtle helps Harry in the end adds a note of bittersweet redemption. She tells him how she died, relives her final moments for him, and inadvertently gives him the clue he needs. It is through her retelling that the monster's identity becomes clear. "It was dreadful," she moans. "I died in this very stall." In her mourning, she becomes a guide, one of the few who has truly seen the monster and survived to speak of it, albeit as a ghost. Tom Riddle's manipulation of the event only adds to the gravity. He took Myrtle's death and weaponized it. He blamed Hagrid, a boy who loved magical creatures but was too poor and too misunderstood to defend himself effectively. Riddle's charm and cunning allowed him to spin the narrative, securing both sympathy and the award for special services to the school. In truth, he had committed murder. Not just cold-blooded murder, but one committed with dark satisfaction, knowing he was enacting Slytherin's will. In many ways, Myrtle becomes a mirror to the true cost of Voldemort's rise. So many deaths, starting with hers, are cloaked in shadows. Her name never made it to the memorials. No portraits were painted. She was the girl who died in the bathroom. Forgotten by the professors who once taught her, reduced to a moaning nuisance by students who never knew her story, Myrtle embodies how the past is neglected until it bleeds into the present. Yet she never receives the same reverence as other fallen characters. Cedric Diggory's death, noble and unjust, is mourned deeply. Dobby's sacrifice is immortalized in tears and tombstones. Even Severus Snape, with all his complexity, is remembered in statues and memorials. But Myrtle? Myrtle is still the ghost no one wants to meet, the punchline, the bathroom joke. Her story isn't celebrated, it's hushed. Her behavior, often viewed as melodramatic or inappropriate, takes on new meaning in this context. She was a teenage girl who died suddenly, cruelly, and remains mentally stuck in the age she died. Her mood swings, bitterness and obsession with gossip are not quirks, they're echoes of trauma. She is frozen in adolescence, forever living the final day of her life. Her emotional outbursts are not just ghostly antics, but manifestations of a deep, unresolved pain. Number 16, Stan Shunpike, is arrested as a Death Eater. Of all the shadows that loomed over the events of Half-Blood Prince, few were as quietly devastating and so widely overlooked as the accusation and arrest of Stan Shunpike. A minor character, known mostly as the gangly, pimply-faced conductor of the night bus, Stan was never expected to play a significant role in the war. And perhaps that is precisely why his fate mattered so much. It was the war's reach into the lives of the ordinary and the powerless that made the moment so chilling. When the Ministry declared him a Death Eater, it wasn't justice that triumphed, but desperation wearing the mask of law. Stan's capture came at a time when the Ministry was collapsing under the pressure of Voldemort's return. Cornelius Fudge had been forced out, his reputation scorched by years of denial and misdirection. His successor, Rufus Scrimgeour, was a man of action, but also a man of appearances. The people needed to believe the government was fighting back. Arrests needed to happen, names had to be named, and if those names were not tied to real threats, they would be fabricated ones. Stan Shunpike became one of them. In Chapter 11 of Half-Blood Prince, the chilling announcement is made with an almost casual cruelty. Stan Shunpike has been arrested on suspicion of Death Eater activity. This was the first crack in the veneer of order. Stan, a young man barely capable of hiding a secret, had suddenly become an agent of Voldemort. The notion was laughable, until it wasn't. Harry's reaction was swift and unyielding. He didn't simply express doubt, he rejected the entire foundation of the accusation.
"Stan Shunpike's not a Death Eater," he said with absolute certainty. "He's just an idiot." In that moment, Harry became something more than a schoolboy with a scar. He became a moral voice calling out into the storm of silence. His protest wasn't just for Stan. It was against the machinery that produced scapegoats in place of justice. This moment laid bare the true state of the magical world. Fear had become institutionalized. The Ministry, once the symbol of order and magical civility, was now a fortress of paranoia. The presumption of innocence had evaporated. Due process was no longer a safeguard, but a formality. If you were unlucky enough to be vulnerable, visible, or voiceless, like Stan, you could be consumed by the system. His arrest did not serve justice. It served the illusion of safety. And that illusion was all the Ministry had left. It is worth remembering who Stan was before he became a cautionary tale. A conductor on the night bus, he ferried witches and wizards across Britain with wide-eyed chatter and barely contained enthusiasm. He was comic relief, not menace. His stories were often ridiculous, his behavior bumbling, but what mattered was that he was known.
not just to the readers, but to Harry. That made his downfall personal. It turned an abstract injustice into a burning wound. This storyline also revealed the widening gulf between Harry and the adult world that claimed to know better. Scrimgeour, like Fudge before him, operated on the politics of sacrifice. Better to imprison one innocent than admit vulnerability. Better to tarnish a name than confess impotence. When Scrimgeour later tries to recruit Harry to bolster public morale, Harry responds with cold contempt. "You're dragging Stan Shunpike off to Azkaban, and here you are asking me to support the Ministry." His voice, once full of youthful eagerness, had hardened into disillusionment. This was no longer a battle of wands, but of values. In the wizarding world, where truth can be pulled from memory and lies can be detected by veritaserum, the fact that Stan's innocence was never proven speaks volumes. The tools existed to determine guilt, but they were not used, not because they failed, but because they threatened the narrative. Stan wasn't arrested because he was dangerous, he was arrested because he was available, and in a time of rising fear, availability was enough. The tragedy of Stan Shunpike is not just that he was arrested, but that his story ends there. We hear whispers of him in Deathly Hallows, still imprisoned, still forgotten. His name becomes one more entry in a long list of collateral damage. But his story was never resolved, never vindicated. Rowling leaves him hanging in narrative limbo, a symbol of the world's quiet cruelties. "He never did anything wrong," Ron mutters at one point, almost too late. The damage has already been done. This moment should have been a turning point in the series' moral architecture. In a saga often defined by battles between light and dark, Stan's arrest introduced a shade of grey more terrifying than any Dementor, because it suggested that evil could masquerade as order, that injustice could wear the robes of law, and that the very institutions designed to protect could be manipulated by fear until they consumed their own citizens. It also illuminated the chasm between Harry and the Ministry. Harry's war was one of truth and courage. The Ministry's war was one of perception. When Scrimgeour later questions Harry's refusal to cooperate, the young wizard's retort is both scathing and prophetic. "I don't like your methods." In those words lies a condemnation of the entire system that failed Stan. It wasn't enough to fight evil. One had to refuse to become it. Stan's fate also parallels another story in the magical world, the wrongful imprisonment of Sirius Black. But while Sirius had his truth revealed and his name eventually cleared, Stan never got that redemption. There was no daring escape, no heroic reveal, only silence, and that silence was deafening. It reminded readers that some stories end not with triumph, but with erasure. The Order of the Phoenix, the supposed counterforce to Ministry corruption, barely mentions Stan. Dumbledore does not intervene. The teachers at Hogwarts remain silent. Even among the resistance, there is a quiet resignation. Perhaps it was because there were too many Stans, too many names, too much fear. But the absence of outrage was itself a commentary. The magical world had grown numb. Number 17, Petunia, received a letter from Dumbledore. In the dusty hallway of Number 4, Privet Drive, beneath the neat rows of coats and the faint scent of lemon polish, there lies a shadow, deeper than any cupboard under the stairs. It is not born of darkness, but of memory. One never spoken of, never shown to guests, never even truly acknowledged. It is the memory of a letter sent by Albus Dumbledore and the ghost of a girl named Petunia who once dreamed of magic. Petunia Evans, before she became Mrs. Dursley, was a child like any other, curious, full of questions, and utterly captivated by the impossible. Her younger sister Lily had that impossible inside her, pouring out of her fingers like sunlight. And Petunia, ordinary Petunia, watched that light with a mix of adoration and growing resentment. According to J.K. Rowling, Petunia once wrote to Dumbledore herself, pleading for admittance to Hogwarts. She was denied, not cruelly, but firmly. The world of wands and wonder was not hers to enter. This moment, referenced in an early interview, was the quiet collapse of a dream. This heartbreak calcified into contempt, not because she hated Lily, but because Lily was a reminder of everything Petunia could never have. And so, over the years, Petunia reinvented herself, as someone who didn't want magic anyway, as someone who believed in tidiness, order, and absolute normality. It is easy, after all, to convince the world you despise something when your hatred is a shield against grief. Years later, the war came. Lily died. And on a cold November morning, Petunia received another letter from Albus Dumbledore. Not an invitation this time, but an instruction cloaked in a terrible kind of grace. "You did not do as I asked," he would write later in Deathly Hallows, a line full of layered meaning. But the original letter was far more significant. In it, Dumbledore explained why Harry had to live at number 4. It was not just for safety or convenience. It was magic of a much older kind. Blood magic. "Lily placed herself between you and the curse," Dumbledore later told Harry. "She provided the protection that still shields you to this day. I knew that Voldemort had gone to the Potter's house. I knew that he might succeed. I knew, too, where Lily's sister lived. And I knew that she hadn't only Lily's blood, but a fierce loathing of her sister's world. That loathing, paradoxically, was the very thing that would protect Harry." Dumbledore invoked an ancient enchantment, the protective magic of shared blood, as long as Harry could call the place where Lily's blood lived home. That place was Petunia's house. That protection would last until Harry turned 17, if Petunia agreed. And so she did, silently, bitterly, and though perhaps not without pain. This detail, so brief in Deathly Hallows, is often overlooked. Dumbledore sent a letter to Petunia. She did not throw it away. She did not return it. She read it, and she agreed. In the book, this letter is referenced only once, fleetingly. As the Dursleys prepare to leave their home under Order of the Phoenix protection, Petunia seems oddly silent. "She might have made a nicer farewell," said Vernon gruffly. "But under the circumstances—" Then an astonishing line. "The letter Dumbledore left with me," Petunia whispered. "He explained why." But she trails off. The subject is closed. Rowling leaves it hanging there, the weight of 100 unspoken emotions packed into an unfinished sentence. This moment, just a single line, changes everything. For years, fans saw Petunia as cruel, cold, almost cartoonishly hostile. The woman who let her nephew sleep in a cupboard, who starved him, who let her son bully him. But the letter hints at another Petunia, one who remembers a sister, not just with hatred, but with grief. One who stood on a doorstep, a baby in her arms, and decided, for reasons she could never explain to Vernon or even to herself, to say yes. It is not a redemption arc. Petunia never becomes warm. She never embraces Harry. She never speaks of Lily with love. But it is a crack in her armor, and through that crack we see something tragic, a woman stuck in the role she created for herself, long after the choice was made. There is an old photograph in the pensive, young Lily and Petunia, holding hands, laughing. The way Petunia looks at her sister in that memory is not with scorn. It is with longing, the kind of longing that only comes from someone who once hoped to share the same light. When that light was denied to her, she turned away from it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it too much to see it up close. The existence of the letter reframes every moment between Petunia and Harry. Her silence during the conversation in Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore's howler reminds her, "Remember my last, Petunia?" That silence is no longer simple fear. It is shame. It is memory. She knows exactly what Dumbledore meant. It was not a threat. It was a reminder of a promise, one she had kept, one she had regretted, one she never told her husband about. Vernon Dursley lived in willful ignorance. He believed Harry brought danger, yes, but he never understood the depth of the protection that lay over number 4. Petunia did, and that knowledge, that she was the barrier between her nephew and death, must have weighed on her in 1,000 unspoken ways. When Harry left for Hogwarts, Petunia did not say goodbye. She did not cry, but she looked at him with an expression that Harry could not place. In Deathly Hallows, when the Dursleys leave their home forever, there is one moment, just one, when Petunia seems about to say something, but she stops. She cannot bring herself to do it. She might have said, "He was my sister's son." She might have said, "I remember her eyes." She might have said, "I did love her once." But all of that is swallowed by years of denial. Petunia does not know how to unmake the bitterness she has built her life upon. In this way, Petunia becomes one of Rowling's most quietly complex characters. Unlike Snape, whose pain is shouted through dramatic gestures and thunderous monologues, Petunia's grief is silent. It is packed into casseroles, trimmed hedges, starched curtains. It lives in the things she does not say. And yet she kept the letter, a letter from the man who told her once that she could not come to Hogwarts. And then later, told her that she could save a child. That letter, which she never shared, never mentioned, never used for praise or pity, was her one connection to that world. She did not belong there, but for 17 years she allowed it into her home. The tragedy is that Petunia never heals. Her grief becomes her identity. Her choices, shaped by envy and hurt, trap her in a loop she cannot escape. And so, even when she has a chance to say one kind word to the boy who looks so much like Lily, she falters. Not because she does not feel, but because she has forgotten how to feel anything that isn't covered in thorns. This is what makes the letter such a powerful twist. It reveals a wound we never knew existed. It reframes a villain as a human. It suggests that Petunia's coldness was not natural, but grown, like a rose turned to bramble when denied the sun. It is a detail so small, so quiet, that most readers never pause to examine it. But once you do, it changes everything. Petunia Evans Dursley was not evil. She was not brave either. She was someone who stood at a crossroads long ago and chose fear. And yet, when given the chance to do one good thing with the only thing that truly mattered, she said yes. That does not make her a hero, but it makes her human. And sometimes, in a world of dragons and dark lords, that is more powerful than magic. Number 18. Argus Filch is a squib. Argus Filch moved through the stone corridors of Hogwarts like a ghost that had never been invited to haunt. He wasn't part of the students' magical world, and he certainly wasn't part of the faculty's circle of trust. He existed in the liminal space of a place brimming with magic, a man with keys jangling at his side and bitterness clanking louder than any chain. When we first meet him, he is all sneers and suspicion, but in Chamber of Secrets the veil is pulled back just for a moment, revealing a secret so profound that it redefines his entire character. Argus Filch is a squib. A squib, born of magical parents but possessing no magical abilities, is a walking contradiction in the wizarding world. Filch, surrounded by children casting spells with careless ease, lives a life of perpetual torment. In Chamber of Secrets, when Harry stumbles upon the envelope bearing the words Quickspell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic, readers learn the truth. Filch snatches the letter away with an urgency that betrays shame, but it's too late. The reality lingers in the air. Hogwarts' caretaker is not merely grumpy, he is a man wounded by a life of exclusion. It is perhaps the most quietly tragic moment in the entire series. There are no dramatic revelations, no duels, no thunderclaps of narrative significance. Just a letter, some spilled ink, and a shattered pride. In that moment, J.K. Rowling gives us a piece of a puzzle that many readers never bother to assemble. The true nature of Filch's anger isn't petty sadism. It's the howling of someone denied entry into the only world he has ever known. Filch was born into magic and denied its embrace. We are never told who his parents were, but we can imagine the expectations placed upon him as a child. Perhaps he was meant to attend Hogwarts himself, his name written in fading ink in the great book kept by Professor McGonagall. And then, nothing. No sparks, no levitation, no light at the tip of a wand, just silence. While other children prepared to be sorted, Filch faced the echoing absence of ability. His letter from Hogwarts never came. Or worse, it came, and he was rejected anyway. That loneliness festered. As the years passed, he didn't retreat into the Muggle world like many squibs do. He stayed close to magic, like a moth hovering near a flame that burns but cannot warm. He took the only role that would allow him to live within the castle's walls, a caretaker, a custodian, a servant. The irony is cruel. He mops enchanted corridors he cannot charm. He polishes suits of armor that sing when no one is looking. He reports to teachers who might have been his classmates had his life taken a different turn. The students mock him, of course. They see only a sour man with a love for punishment. They call him names behind his back. Fred and George Weasley, in particular, delight in tormenting him, always one step ahead, always armed with magic that Filch cannot counter. He is powerless to stop them, a janitor in a world that runs on spells. But Filch doesn't fear the students. He loathes them. Every flick of their wand is a reminder of what he will never be. His desire to punish them, to see them suffer consequences, is born from more than authoritarianism. It's born from envy. In Chamber of Secrets, when Mrs. Norris is petrified and Filch is the first to discover her, he doesn't accuse the perpetrator with logic. He turns on Harry immediately and shouts, "You've murdered my cat!" His voice is trembling, not just with grief, but with impotence. Mrs. Norris is more than a pet. She is a lifeline. She patrols the corridors as his extension, his magical surrogate. Their bond is eerie and intense. She alerts him to rule breakers, not by magic, but by loyalty. In a way, Filch channels his unmet magical potential through her. When she is attacked, it feels like an attack on the last thread connecting him to the enchanted world. Losing her would be like dying in pieces. The wizarding world does not speak kindly of squibs. Dumbledore, in all his wisdom, offers Filch a place at Hogwarts, but even he never addresses the caretaker's condition with kindness or openness. It is the elephant in the room. Even among those who preach tolerance, a squib is an awkward presence. Filch is treated not like an outsider, but like an inconvenience. Too magical to live among muggles, too mundane to belong among wizards. And what of the Quickspell course? The very existence of that letter proves something quietly heartbreaking. Filch hasn't given up. Even in middle age, even after years of mockery, he still hopes to bridge the impossible gap. He clings to the idea that he can learn magic by correspondence, like it's a language or a trade. But magic doesn't work like that. It is either in your blood or it is not. The course is likely a scam, a cruel promise made to desperate people. Yet Filch sends away for it anyway, hoping for a miracle. There is something unbearably human about that act. Many characters in the series are brave in the face of evil, but Filch is brave in the face of futility. He wakes up every day knowing that he will never be a wizard, and still he goes to work in the greatest magical school in the world. He scrubs floors enchanted by children. He tends to injuries from spell mishaps. He polices broom closets where young lovers cast charms. And he does it all with the gnawing knowledge that he is the only one there who cannot join in the dance. We never hear from Filch about his past. He doesn't monologue, doesn't ask for pity. He is a silent sufferer, and that makes his pain all the more poignant. Unlike characters like Snape or Lupin, whose inner demons are eventually laid bare, Filch remains a mystery to most. Even Harry, who uncovers the Quickspell letter, doesn't dwell on its meaning. The narrative moves on and the audience forgets, but the man remains. Filch's role in the second book in particular gains depth with this revelation. His reaction to Mrs. Norris's petrification isn't just grief amidst panic. He fears the castle will eject him, that Dumbledore will finally decide that a squib has no place in Hogwarts. His scream is the sound of a man who knows his entire life can be undone in an instant. The cat was never just a companion. She was a shield, a partner, a symbol of his thin claim to belonging. And then there's his obsessive focus on discipline. He longs to bring back corporal punishment, fantasizes about hanging students by their thumbs. These aren't merely the sadistic desires of a bitter man, they are the coping mechanisms of someone who cannot assert power the usual way. Lacking magic, he clutches onto rules. If he cannot cast spells, he can at least enforce the code of conduct with unwavering zeal. Hogwarts is a castle full of ghosts, but none haunt its halls more tragically than Argus Filch. He is not a remnant of the dead, but a reminder of the living left behind. Even nearly headless Nick finds more camaraderie among the students than Filch ever will. He isn't seen, not truly. He is background noise to most, a grumbling caretaker to be avoided. Rowling never returns to the squib revelation in later books. It is one of the few threads left dangling. As the stakes rise and Voldemort returns, Filch fades further into the background, but the knowledge remains like a secret room hidden behind a tapestry. Filch is a man whose soul has been scarred by rejection, and whose bitterness is a mask for unbearable longing. One wonders what might have happened had Filch been born different. Would he have been a Gryffindor, brave and fierce, or a Slytherin, driven by ambition and resentment? Would he have found friends among his peers, learned transfiguration under McGonagall's sharp gaze, duelled in defence against the dark arts? We will never know. That life was stolen before it began, and all that remains is a man with a mop and a cat. The wizarding world in its grandeur often forgets its casualties. It lauds the chosen one, praises the headmasters, and marvels at magical feats. But Filch is a casualty, not of war, but of birth. He is the invisible reminder that even in a world full of wonders, there are still those who suffer from silence and absence. Filch's presence in the story challenges the assumption that everyone at Hogwarts has a place. He proves that proximity to magic is not the same as inclusion. His bitterness, when viewed through this lens, is not a flaw of character, but a consequence of rejection. His longing, hidden beneath layers of grime and growls, is more profound than any spell. The tragedy of Argus Filch lies not in what he is, but in what he is not, and what he can never be. He is a man whose very existence at Hogwarts is both miracle and curse. He keeps the school clean, yet is never truly part of it. He knows every corner of the castle, but walks it alone. His keys open every door except the one that would let him in. And yet, despite everything, he remains. Perhaps that is his quiet form of resistance, to stay, to serve, to endure. In a world that overlooked him, Argus Filch endures. That, in its own strange way, is a kind of magic. Number 19, Quirrell is possessed by Voldemort. In the corridors of Hogwarts, danger often masqueraded behind the ordinary, and in no place was that more evident than in the figure of Professor Quirinus Quirrell. Nervous, stammering, seemingly terrified of his own shadow, he was a man everyone overlooked, except perhaps for his curious choice to wear a turban indoors and the strange, garlicky odour that clung to his robes. But even that Rowling made sure to explain away, feeding the reader rumours that he wore the turban to ward off vampires. It was such an odd and harmless detail that no one questioned it too closely, and that was the first great sleight of hand. While readers fixated on Severus Snape's dramatic cloak-billowing and harsh treatment of Harry, the real danger was whispering in the quiet voice of a man too afraid to speak. Rowling masterfully redirected suspicion onto Snape, crafting him into the perfect red herring. From Harry's first broomstick malfunction during a Quidditch match to Snape's seemingly threatening behavior at Halloween, all signs pointed toward him. "Snape's trying to steal whatever that dog is guarding," Ron whispered urgently. And we, like Harry, believed it. We saw what Harry saw, and Rowling ensured that our perceptions matched his. But behind the scenes, Quirrell was weaving a more sinister web, and no one noticed. It's a plot twist so bold, so intricately woven into the narrative, that it deserves far more recognition than it usually receives. The twist that Professor Quirrell, mild, meek, mousy Quirrell, was not only working against Harry, but was carrying Lord Voldemort himself under his turban, stunned readers. It turned the narrative on its head. He wasn't just a servant of darkness, he was physically possessed. And this was revealed not through bombast, but through a slow-burning confrontation that, once unraveled, made everything click into place with horrifying clarity. When Quirrell says, "I met him when I travelled around the world. A foolish young man I was then, full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil," we realize how far he has fallen. He had once been an ambitious scholar, eager to prove himself, and instead of defeating darkness, he submitted to it. It wasn't a sudden shift. Voldemort didn't simply inhabit him, Quirrell allowed it. That is what made the betrayal so profound. It wasn't mind control, it was surrender. Throughout Philosopher's Stone, Quirrell is always there, always observing. During the troll incident, while Snape ran to investigate the third-floor corridor, Quirrell was curiously absent. When Harry's broom went haywire, it was Quirrell, not Snape, who had cast the jinx, silently muttering while Snape countercursed from across the field. "Snape was trying to save me," Harry would ask in disbelief later. That's when the reader must revisit everything they thought they knew. The brilliance of the twist lies in its placement. It's not just a surprise for the sake of shock. It reshapes the narrative retrospectively. We are forced to reevaluate every interaction. The moment when Quirrell shudders at the sight of Harry, the beads of sweat on his forehead when Hagrid mentions Gringotts, the tension in his voice when he tries to refuse Harry entry into the mirror of Erised room. Every one of these clues was planted carefully, almost invisibly. The twist isn't arbitrary, it's earned. Consider the mirror of Erised sequence. Quirrell stands before the mirror, helpless. He does not understand the mirror, Voldemort sneers from the back of his head. And that's the moment when Harry, still only 11, realizes that the villain he feared most was literally staring him in the face, backwards. The metaphor becomes terrifyingly real. Evil didn't just look him in the eye, it hid behind one. The physical horror of Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's skull is one of the most grotesque images in the entire series. Rowling didn't pull punches with it. Where there should have been a back to Quirrell's head, there was a face. The most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It's a sentence that snaps like a whip. The twist is no longer just a clever narrative device, it's a moment of body horror, of violated identity, of transformation, gone terribly wrong, and it signals that the Harry Potter series would not be afraid of darkness. Yet despite its impact, this plot twist is often overshadowed by later developments, the death of Cedric Diggory, the revelation of Sirius Black, the resurrection of Voldemort, the half-blood prince's betrayal. But this was the first time Rowling proved that she could lead readers into a trap of their own assumptions, and that she could do it with finesse. One of the most haunting details is that Quirrell dies for his loyalty, not in a blaze of redemption, but in agony. "Master, I cannot hold him," he cries, as Harry's touch begins to burn him. "Then kill him, fool, and be done!" Voldemort snaps, but he cannot. The Dark Lord flees, leaving his host to die. It's the first brutal lesson about Voldemort's philosophy. Loyalty is disposable, weakness is punishable, even those who serve him with their lives are discarded like broken wands. This moment also serves as a subtle mirror of what Harry will face again and again. people who make choices. Dumbledore later explains, "It was your mother's love that saved you." But it's also Harry's choice to stand up to fight that destroys Quirrell. The twist doesn't just shift the villain, it introduces the central themes of choice, sacrifice, and the corrupting influence of power. Quirrell didn't just stumble into evil, he embraced it. That's why he burned. Quirrell's character, when examined through this lens, becomes one of the most tragic in the series. He wasn't born a monster. He went looking for Voldemort, not to serve him, but to confront him, to gain recognition. That is what makes his downfall so compelling. In trying to prove his strength, he opened himself to possession, and Voldemort, like the parasite he is, entered through that wound of pride. There is also a deeper literary symbolism in Quirrell's two-faced form. It evokes Janus, the Roman god of duality, who looks both to the past and future. Quirrell, too, is split between the man he was and the thing he became. His transformation from cowardly professor to haunted vessel mirrors the core struggle in the series, identity versus corruption. And Rowling does all this in the very first book. In hindsight, Quirrell's presence in the story was always eerie. His frequent headaches, his aversion to eye contact, his sudden mastery of defensive spells despite his stammering demeanor. When he touches Harry for the first time, he recoils. His whole body gave a shudder. It's not just because of Harry's scar, it's because Harry represents the one thing Voldemort cannot endure: love. The tragedy is amplified by how little the characters reflect on his death. There is no funeral, no mourning, just the end of a school year and house points awarded. It's as though the world forgets him as quickly as he died, and perhaps that's the final insult. A man who let darkness consume him is remembered only for wearing a turban. Yet the story doesn't forget. Dumbledore's warning to Harry echoes through the series. "You'll find that I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me." The inverse is true for Voldemort. He never truly leaves when loyalty, even misguided, remains. Quirrell was the first of many who proved that allegiance to evil doesn't require strength, it only requires surrender. In a series that is often celebrated for its dramatic character arcs and deep mythologies, Quirrell's twist stands out as a compact masterpiece of misdirection, psychological horror, and thematic groundwork. It taught readers not to trust appearances, not to trust assumptions, and most of all, not to underestimate the quiet ones. By the time the book ends and Harry recovers in the hospital wing, we almost forget how close he came to dying, not in battle, but in misunderstanding. Had he not followed his instincts, had he trusted what others told him about Quirrell's harmlessness, Voldemort might have returned that very night. "I was lucky once," Harry says quietly. But it wasn't luck, it was courage and clarity, traits Quirrell had long discarded. This plot twist, then, is not just about narrative shock, it is the seed of the entire series' philosophy, that evil hides in the meek, that power corrupts slowly, and that the greatest battles are often fought within. Quirrell's downfall isn't just a lesson to Harry, it's a warning to us all. The enemy may not always roar. Sometimes he whispers. Number 20, Hufflepuff's Cup, is a Horcrux. The golden cup gleamed faintly in the dim vault beneath Gringotts, nestled among mountains of cursed treasures. Once a cherished relic of Helga Hufflepuff, now it sat corrupted, its warm legacy twisted by the cold ambition of Lord Voldemort. This was no ordinary object. It was one of his Horcruxes, but more importantly, it was a forgotten pivot in the story, a narrative turn so rich in symbolism and magical history that it deserved more recognition than it ever received. Helga Hufflepuff's cup had always stood apart. While Godric Gryffindor's sword represented bravery and Salazar Slytherin's locket symbolized cunning, Hufflepuff's cup embodied nourishment, fairness, and hospitality. In legend, it was said to bestow the ability to produce magical food and drink in abundance. The object was an echo of its owner's values, a beacon of care in a world obsessed with power. But Voldemort saw it differently. He saw it as ancient, valuable, and thus ideal for desecration. He stole it from Hepzibah Smith, a wealthy witch who claimed descent from Hufflepuff herself. Her adoration for the relic blinded her to the danger Tom Riddle posed.
"I had no idea that I was in the presence of such greatness," she told him, displaying both the cup and the locket. Days later, she was dead and the cup was gone. Her death was framed as a house elf's error, but the theft was strategic. Voldemort wanted objects that not only held magical resonance but also deep historical roots in wizarding culture. This was not random cruelty. It was a carefully orchestrated plot to anchor his soul in the very fabric of magical history. Voldemort believed that the grandeur of the Founders would make his Horcruxes more secure, more revered, and in a twisted way more permanent. He would have considered this a worthy hiding place for one of his Horcruxes, Dumbledore said, reflecting on the vault at Gringotts, lined with ancient magic and guarded by blood curses and goblin enchantments. The moment in Deathly Hallows when Hermione reaches into the burning treasure, grabbing the cup with dragonfire licking at her skin, is not merely an action scene. It is a poetic clash of past and present. Here, the last remnants of Hufflepuff's benevolence are extracted from the belly of greed and hatred. The vault multiplies its treasures endlessly as a defensive measure, echoing the theme of unchecked desire. Fitting for a Horcrux born of both pride and theft. What remains vastly underappreciated is the symbolic weight of the cup itself. In Christian and mythological symbolism, a cup often signifies life, renewal, or even divine grace. Helga's cup, in its original purpose, served similar ideals: nurturing, healing, and equality. Voldemort's desecration of it, using it to store a fragment of his fractured soul, was a profanation of those values. It wasn't just a magical object he defiled, it was a historical ideal. Unlike other Horcruxes, the cup had a direct emotional connection to its original owner's philosophy. Hufflepuff valued loyalty and inclusivity, traits Voldemort despised. To use her relic as a vessel for soul division was a violent rejection of her ideals, an insult carved into magical heritage. It was more than strategy, it was vengeance on history itself. That's what made it so devastating and, paradoxically, so perfect to Horcrux. In that sense, the cup stands as Voldemort's hypocrisy laid bare. He pretended to be above the Founders to surpass the limitations of mortality, but he relied on their legacies to preserve himself. He loathed Hogwarts for what it represented, equality in magical learning, yet he embedded his soul in the symbols of that very school. He hated Muggleborns but stored his essence in the cup of a witch who welcomed them. The destruction of the cup by Hermione Granger, using a basilisk fang from the Chamber of Secrets, was poetic justice. She, a Muggleborn girl, obliterated a piece of the darkest wizard's soul housed in the legacy of a founder who would have welcomed her. A cascade of golden light erupted from the cup, the book describes, capturing the moment when purity triumphed over corruption. The magic that sealed the cup's sanctity was undone, not by raw power alone, but by bravery and historical irony. Still, this plot point is often overshadowed by louder moments: the snake in the castle, the locket in the forest, the final duel at dawn. Yet the vault of Lestrange's fortune tells a layered tale of theft, of arrogance, of history weaponized against itself. That vault is a tomb where ideals were buried, and when Harry and his friends broke in, they weren't just retrieving a Horcrux. They were unearthing a forgotten war between values, compassion and cruelty, heritage and desecration. The cup's journey from Hufflepuff's hand to Hepzibah's drawing room, then to Bellatrix's vault, and finally to its destruction in the chamber, mirrors the corruption of legacy. Each step transformed it further from its roots. Hepzibah admired it for pride, Bellatrix guarded it for power, and Voldemort used it for immortality. Only when it was finally destroyed could its original meaning breathe again.
Another remarkable detail lies in how the cup was hidden. Voldemort chose a vault of unimaginable wealth, but not just any vault, one belonging to a family of pure-blood supremacists. Bellatrix Lestrange, his most fanatical servant, guarded it without ever knowing its full truth. To her, it was a prize. To Voldemort, it was insurance. To the story, it was a mirror of what happens when history is hoarded and twisted beyond recognition. The scene in Gringotts is drenched in allegory. The enchanted vault multiplies anything it touches, a symbol of how greed distorts and replicates endlessly, burying what truly matters beneath a mountain of distraction. The cup, so small and golden, almost vanishes in that chaos, a visual metaphor for how legacy is often lost in spectacle. Hermione's fingers, burned and blistered, find it not through chance, but through moral clarity. The presence of the dragon in the vault further reinforces this theme. It's blind, chained, tortured. A beast guarding wealth it cannot see or use. Voldemort's soul, hidden in such a place, echoes this tragedy. His quest for eternal life has made him monstrous, enslaved by his own designs. The cup's imprisonment mirrors the fate of the dragon, both once majestic, both now symbols of violated purpose. Yet despite its depth, this Horcrux receives less narrative reflection than the diary or the locket. Perhaps because Hufflepuff herself is the least dramatic of the founders, the cup is often treated as a mere object on the checklist of Voldemort's destruction. But this is a misreading. The cup represents a key philosophical contrast in the saga. Kindness turned into cruelty, generosity defiled by possession. When Dumbledore says Lord Voldemort liked to collect trophies, he isn't only speaking of power, he's speaking of desecration, the perverse joy Voldemort found in turning meaningful symbols into anchors of his inhumanity. Each Horcrux was a triumph of desecration, and the cup was perhaps the most sacrilegious of them all. He did not just kill to make it, he robbed the meaning of history. This is why the moment of its destruction should resonate more deeply. Hermione in that instant is not only a warrior, she is an archivist correcting a distortion. She brings fire to a relic darkened by ego, and in doing so, honors its original light. The golden cup, in its last breath, becomes a symbol again, not of Hufflepuff's hospitality, not of Voldemort's ambition, but of resilience. Few artifacts in the series undergo such transformation. The sword of Gryffindor remains noble. The locket is broken open by courage. The diadem falls in the fire, destroyed amidst collapsing books. But only the cup moves through so many hands, shifting meanings with every touch, before finally being returned to its silence. It is a journey of corruption and, ultimately, redemption through destruction. And in the greater structure of the story, this Horcrux stands as a quiet rebuttal to all the voices that ever dismissed Hufflepuff as the leftover house. The very fact that Voldemort sought her relic means he feared its magic. He feared the quiet power of kindness, the heritage of balance, the strength in fairness. In corrupting her memory, he admitted its threat. Helga Hufflepuff's cup was never just a cup. It was a vessel of legacy, not only of soul, but of ideology. Voldemort tried to possess it, bend it, turn it into something immortal. But in the end, he only proved that even the darkest magic cannot fully suppress what was born of light. The cup's golden sheen, even in death, reflects something Voldemort could never grasp, that the greatest power lies not in domination, but in the quiet endurance of good. Number 21. Snape is the half-blood prince. Of all the names whispered in the stone corridors of Hogwarts, few carried the weight of Severus Snape's, a figure wrapped in shadows, dread, and disdain. He was to most Gryffindors the embodiment of injustice, a teacher who sneered at bravery, crushed enthusiasm, and preserved his sympathies for Slytherin. But the moment the truth was unveiled, that Snape himself was the enigmatic half-blood prince, a seismic shift rippled through the story. For all the years of suspicion and mystery, this was the moment that redefined him, not just as a character but as a symbol of pain, ambition, and buried identity. Yet this twist, as profound as it was, faded into the background of grander revelations. It never received the full appreciation it deserved. Snape's identity as the Half-Blood Prince revealed a long-buried fracture within him, a duality that had always been there, yet never fully named. Born to Tobias Snape, a Muggle man described as nothing but a scrawny, foul-tempered man who shouted a lot. An Eileen Prince, a witch who bore the brunt of her husband's anger in silence, Severus inherited the blood of two worlds. He was neither fully accepted in the Muggle realm nor entirely embraced by the wizarding world. His chosen name, the Half-Blood Prince, was not just a clever alias, it was a rebellion. It was a battle cry against the rejection he'd felt, and a reminder to himself that he was something more than what life had handed him. He didn't write Half-Blood Prince on the margins of textbooks just for anonymity. He branded the name into pages like a scar onto skin. For years, the potions textbook that Harry used in his 6th year bore that strange pseudonym. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince, it read, in an elegant, slanting hand. The annotations within, brilliant, lethal, and sometimes dangerous, turned a mundane classroom manual into a masterpiece of innovation. And in those pages, Snape bared something intimate. His desperate need to rise above his origins, to prove his genius in a world that had mocked his roots. What makes this twist even more devastating is how it casts light on Snape's prejudices. Throughout the series, his contempt for Hermione Granger seemed particularly cruel. She was a top student, fiercely intelligent and Muggle-born, traits that seemed to trigger Snape's scorn. Yet in that scorn lay a mirror. Hermione reminded him of himself. The child who had lived in a small, grim house in Spinner's End, mastering magic, not by privilege but by obsession. But she had something he never had, acceptance. She had friends, trust, even admiration. Snape, on the other hand, had clung to his brilliance like a shield, and when he mocked her as an insufferable know-it-all, perhaps he wasn't condemning her, perhaps he was mourning what he had never been allowed to be. The name Half-Blood Prince carried the echo of his mother's lineage. Eileen Prince, a pure-blood witch with a name that should have guaranteed her son entry into the upper echelons of wizarding society. Instead, Severus wore the shame of being the product of a broken home. He had seen magic through the cracks in the wall, not as something wondrous, but as a thing that caused his parents to fight, a thing that made his father rage and his mother weep. And so when he found the world of Hogwarts, he didn't arrive with wide eyes. He arrived with a mission, to rise, to be feared, and to never be powerless again. That hunger for control manifested in his experiments. He improved potion instructions with precision beyond his years. He created spells like Sectum Sempra, a curse so vicious it mimicked the slashes of a blade. Harry, wielding the prince's magic without understanding its origin, used it on Draco Malfoy and was horrified by the result. "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter?" Snape roared in that chilling moment. The sting in his voice wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. That spell had been born in loneliness, honed in bitterness, and meant to be his secret weapon. And Harry, without knowledge or cost, had used it, a painful metaphor for how others had always taken from Snape without understanding the depth of his sacrifice. The reveal came quietly in the book, almost as an afterthought. After Dumbledore's death, after the chaos, after the betrayal, when Harry finally confronted him, Snape shouted, "I am the Half-Blood Prince!" And then he was gone into the night. No further explanation, no context, just the declaration of a name that had haunted the margins of every page, now spoken aloud. And with that, readers were left to piece together its meaning. But it deserved more. This was not just a twist. It was the root of Snape's conflict with James Potter, the golden boy who had taunted him for his background. It was the root of his fascination with Lily Evans, the Muggle-born girl who had seen past his grime and anger, who had spoken to him before anyone else had. Snape's loathing for James wasn't just about bullying. It was about watching someone with everything he lacked: blood, beauty, popularity, win the only thing he had ever loved. "You disgust me," Lily once said when Snape called her a mudblood in a moment of blind rage. That word, the same word he might later frown upon others for using, was born from his self-loathing, not belief. Snape's hatred for Muggleborns was never doctrinal. It wasn't rooted in Voldemort's ideology. It was personal. He hated what he was and hated the reminder of it. He clung to pure blood superiority as a defense, even as he knew it would never include him. To Voldemort, Snape was useful but never trusted. A half-blood spy tolerated but never embraced. Even within the Death Eaters, Snape was an outsider pretending to belong. And that's what makes the twist so tragic, because the same man who carried this shame in his blood also chose to betray Voldemort for love. He became Dumbledore's most loyal ally, not for ideology, not for glory, but to protect the son of the woman who had once saved him from himself. And still, even in his redemption, he remained hidden. "Look at me," were his final words. Not to gain forgiveness, but to die looking into Lily's eyes, even if they now belonged to Harry. The Half-Blood Prince was a mask, a creation of a child who wanted to feel powerful. It was not evil, it was desperate. It was an identity cobbled together by a boy who had nothing, no friends, no safety, no love, and who used his mind as his only weapon. "Turn to page 394, he said in that cold voice during one lesson. The kind of detail that speaks of a man who demands control, because control is the only thing that keeps him from falling apart. And even as an adult, Snape kept that mask. He never told anyone. He didn't boast. He didn't correct Harry when he accused the Half-Blood Prince of being a dark wizard. That silence spoke volumes. It was shame, it was resignation, and it was a kind of penance. The tragedy of the twist lies in its quietness, in a series where every major revelation is punctuated by fanfare, Horcruxes, Deathly Hallows, bloodlines. This one was whispered. A name, a memory, a vanished man. But it was one of the most human revelations of the entire series, because it reminded readers that the monsters we see might be boys who were never rescued, that cruelty can grow from pain, and that masks, once worn too long, can become skin. Severus Snape's entire character arc is encapsulated in that one name. It explained his bitterness, his genius, his rage. It explained why he protected Draco, why he hated Sirius, why he refused to be seen as vulnerable. It explained the hidden brilliance behind his potions, his inventions, and his unreadable face. Every sneer, every insult, every punishment, all of it was armor. The Half-Blood Prince was not a villain. He was a survivor. The very book that bore the prince's handwriting was almost destroyed by Harry, who, unable to deal with the spell that had nearly killed Malfoy, hid it in the room of requirement. But that act of discarding the book was also symbolic. It was as if Harry had buried the truth of Snape before understanding it. That book contained not just potions and curses, but a voice that had once belonged to a boy with black hair, poor clothes, and dreams too big for Spinner's End. No character in the series walks such a tightrope between heroism and hatred, and the revelation that he was the Half-Blood Prince makes all the more sense of his duality. A Slytherin who died for Gryffindor's cause, a man who hated muggles but saved a muggle-born son, a teacher who bullied but who taught more than he ever admitted. The twist should have opened readers' eyes to all of it, but instead it was left in the shadows, just like him. Had this twist been given more weight, a deeper flashback, a conversation, even a moment of reflection, perhaps more readers would have paused, would have seen not just the potion master, but the child behind the cauldron, the child who renamed himself because the name he'd been born with never brought him anything but grief. Even now, rereading Half-Blood Prince, there's an ache in realizing how much of Snape's pain was invisible. "You have your mother's eyes," he said in the end. Not to insult, not to intimidate, but to remember, to grieve. Because the Half-Blood Prince had never been able to let go. He had buried his love in loyalty, his shame in sarcasm, and his brilliance in anonymity. The true magic of the Harry Potter series lies not only in spells, but in the characters who cast them. Snape's story, when traced through the lens of the Half-Blood Prince, is not one of villainy, but of damage. The name he chose was a cry for dignity in a world that had denied him it. And though he died with many calling him traitor, in the end he was perhaps the bravest man Harry ever knew, and the loneliest. Child readers ever overlooked. Number 22, Voldemort Cannot Love. Of all the overlooked revelations in the Harry Potter series, none is more tragic or more illuminating than the moment in Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore explains the root of Voldemort's inability to love. It happens quietly, almost as a passing detail, nestled among the cascading memories that shape the sixth book's haunted tone. Dumbledore tells Harry that Tom Riddle was conceived while his father, Tom Riddle Sr., was under the influence of a love potion brewed by Merop Gaunt. A forced affection, a love that was never real. And when the potion wore off, Tom Riddle Sr. abandoned Merop, pregnant and alone. This, says Dumbledore, left a mark more profound than any scar. You see, he says, he was conceived under the influence of a love potion. It is perhaps the root of his inability to love. To say that a human being's capacity for love is determined at conception might seem extreme, but the series never asks the reader to view this explanation in purely biological terms. Instead, Rowling weaves this idea into the metaphysical framework of her world. Magic, after all, is deeply tied to intention, emotion, and soul. The act of creating life without love in this universe isn't merely unethical. It's an affront to the very magic that sustains it. Tom Riddle's birth wasn't just loveless, it was built on illusion, control, and deceit. He began life as a product of manipulation, and so he grew into a master manipulator, incapable of forming bonds that weren't transactional or fear-based. When young Tom Riddle appears in the orphanage memory, he already exhibits a chilling detachment. He speaks with eerie confidence, cruelty, and an obsession with being special. There is no hint of affection for the other children, no wistfulness for family, no curiosity about his mother. The boy who should be asking who he is instead asserts what he wants to be: powerful, unique, feared. "I can make people hurt if I want to," he says to Dumbledore in the orphanage. There is no guilt, no shame. This is not a child searching for love or validation. It is a child looking for control. What makes this backstory extraordinary is how quietly it reshapes the entire moral architecture of the series. Voldemort isn't just evil because he chooses power over kindness. He's incapable of even comprehending love. It is not in his nature because his very existence began in its absence. And the implications of that run deep. For years, fans and critics alike have focused on Horcruxes, Elder Wands, and curses, but the real curse Voldemort suffers under is the one no spell can undo: the inability to love, to connect, to live. As Dumbledore says, he never had friends, not because he disliked the company, but because he did not understand companionship. This understanding casts a tragic shadow over every one of Voldemort's choices. He creates Horcruxes, not just to preserve life, but because he cannot fathom what makes life worth preserving. He surrounds himself with followers, but remains alone in every room he enters. Even his most loyal servant, Bellatrix Lestrange, worships him with a kind of madness that he does not and cannot reciprocate. He is adored and feared, but he is never loved. When Narcissa Malfoy lies to him at the end of Deathly Hallows, telling him Harry is dead, she does it for her son, not for him. And he never notices. What makes Harry the perfect foil to Voldemort is not simply that he's brave or noble or the chosen one. It's that he loves, he grieves, he holds people close, he misses Sirius, he longs for his parents, he saves Draco, he digs a grave for Dobby by hand, he chooses to walk into the forest and die not out of duty, but out of love for those behind him. This, Dumbledore tells him in King's Cross, is what sets him apart. You are the true master of death because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying. The contrast comes into focus most vividly during Voldemort's final defeat. Harry calls him by his name, Tom Riddle, not to humiliate, but to humanize, to remind him of the boy who once was and of the choices that led him to become what he is. But Voldemort cannot hear it. He sneers at love. Is it love again? He mocks in Order of the Phoenix. Dumbledore's favourite solution, love, which he claimed conquered all. Even as his world crumbles, he cannot grasp that love is not a weakness, it is not a tactic, it is the very thing he lacks. One of the most overlooked moments that reinforces this is in Goblet of Fire, during the graveyard scene. When Voldemort touches Harry, he marvels that the pain of love's protection is gone. "I can touch you now," he whispers. What he doesn't understand is that the power wasn't in Lily's sacrifice as a singular spell. It was in Harry himself, and in every act of kindness that followed. Voldemort believes he has broken the magic, but he has only broken the surface. He never notices that Harry is protected not by ancient enchantments, but by the living web of people who care for him. It is also no coincidence that Voldemort cannot produce a Patronus. The Patronus charm requires a happy memory, a pure moment of joy and love. In Order of the Phoenix, Umbridge cannot cast one either unless she draws upon perverse satisfaction. Voldemort, who has neither joy nor love, would fail utterly. It is a symbol of his internal void. Magic that is rooted in empathy, in positive emotion, is closed to him. He is a master of dark arts, but a novice in the light. This failure is echoed when he possesses Harry at the Ministry. For a brief, excruciating moment, Voldemort invades Harry's mind and body, and finds it unbearable. Not because of magic or resistance charms, but because of what he feels. "You're the weak one," Harry tells him, "and you'll never know love or friendship. And I feel sorry for you." Voldemort recoils, not because he is hurt physically, but because he is overwhelmed by a feeling he cannot name. It's too foreign, too human. Even his most meticulous plans collapse under the weight of this blind spot. He underestimates Severus Snape, never realizing that Snape's loyalty is driven by love, unwavering, anguished love for Lily Potter. "You have your mother's eyes," are Snape's last words, and Voldemort never understands what they mean. He kills Snape to gain the Elder Wand, unable to fathom that a man might serve two masters and betray one out of love. He is defeated not by power, but by an emotion he deemed irrelevant. The irony deepens when we look at the Resurrection Stone, hidden in the gaunt ring. This Hallows item is meant to bring back the dead, those we love. Voldemort uses it unknowingly as a mere Horcrux container. He never sees its true meaning. The stone is never activated by him because its power lies in remembrance, not resurrection, in love, not dominance. For Harry, it brings the shades of his parents, Lupin and Sirius. For Voldemort, it brings nothing. In Dumbledore's office, when he tells Harry the truth about Voldemort's conception, his tone is not accusatory, it is mournful. "He was born of a mother who loved not, and a father who loved not," he says. The tragedy is not that Voldemort is evil. The tragedy is that he never had a chance to be anything else. His life is a prophecy fulfilled not by fate, but by emptiness, by a womb that held no love and a life that never found it. Rowling crafts this origin with deliberate symbolism. Merab Gaunt is a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, and her obsession with Tom Riddle Sr. is not born of passion, but of desperation. She uses a potion to fabricate love, and when it fails, she withers away. Her death during childbirth is more than a medical event. It is a curse handed down. A mother dying unloved, a child born unloved. A cycle Voldemort never breaks. In this, his story mirrors that of many orphans in the series, but with one crucial difference: they are saved by love. He is not. When Harry walks to his death in the Forbidden Forest, guided by the ghosts of those who loved him, he is at peace. "You'll stay with me?" he asks, and they answer, "until the very end." Voldemort, in contrast, dies alone. His final moment is not shared with anyone who cares. No one cries for him. No one mourns him. Even his snake, Nagini, is dispatched by Neville in an act of defiance. Voldemort does not fall heroically. He disintegrates. He becomes nothing. The power of this plot twist lies not in the revelation itself, but in how quietly it echoes through every other moment. It explains why the killing curse rebounded, why love protects, why loyalty wins, why Harry's tears matter more than Voldemort's wand. The wizarding world has its spells, its wars, its legends, but the truest magic, the one Voldemort could never possess, is the magic of the heart. Number 23, Dudley. Thanks, Harry. Of all the subtle magic in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, one of the most overlooked yet deeply powerful moments happens not at Hogwarts nor in the Forbidden Forest, but on a quiet suburban doorstep in Privet Drive. It involves no wand light, no curses, and no flying sparks. Instead, it is a moment of awkward silence, of a clumsy outstretched hand, and of a boy, now almost a man, finally breaking free from the script his parents wrote for him. When Dudley Dursley thanks Harry Potter for saving his life, it's a plot twist no one expected, and few have given the credit it deserves. For years, Dudley was a symbol of everything Harry was not. While Harry slept in a cupboard and wore clothes several sizes too big, Dudley had 2 bedrooms to himself and a collection of broken toys that could fill a small warehouse. He was spoiled, loud, and cruel. The Dudley of the Sorcerer's Stone punched Harry and called him names. The Dudley of the Order of the Phoenix taunted a boy grieving over the death of Cedric Diggory. And as readers, we hated him for it. It felt satisfying to see Dudley terrified by a Dementor. Justice, some might say. But J.K. Rowling never wrote a world of simple villains. Redemption in her stories isn't reserved for heroes or anti-heroes. It touches the peripheral characters too. And so the Dudley we see at the start of the Deathly Hallows is not the same boy who once delighted in tormenting Harry. He is slower with his words, hesitant in movement, as if battling with ideas larger than himself. In the quiet before leaving their home forever, Vernon Dursley rants, Petunia fusses, and Dudley, unexpectedly, lingers. There's something he needs to say. In that moment, Rowling offers us a new version of Dudley, not as a bully, but as a young man struggling to do what's right, even if it embarrasses him. When the Dursleys are being evacuated for their protection, Dudley pauses and thanks Harry. It's awkward. The words don't come easily. "I don't think you're a waste of space." Those are his exact words. Nothing flowery, just that. But in those few syllables lies the collapse of years of hatred, brainwashing, and prejudice. This small gesture, often skimmed over, is monumental. It signifies Dudley's growth in a way more profound than any spell could achieve. He doesn't suddenly become a wizard's ally, nor does he renounce his past entirely, but he acknowledges, perhaps for the first time, that Harry is a person worthy of respect. And it's not only about gratitude for being saved from the Dementors, it's about recognition. After years of treating Harry like something to be stepped on, Dudley finally sees him. The moment is all the more powerful because of its brevity. Rowling doesn't dwell on it. She doesn't insert a dramatic reconciliation scene or any further dialogue. The hand is offered, the thanks are given, and that's it. Harry is stunned. He didn't expect it, the readers didn't either. But the gesture lingers long after the scene ends. Rowling trusted her audience to understand the magnitude of that change, perhaps too much, because many readers pass over it without absorbing what it truly means. We must not forget that Dudley was a product of Vernon and Petunia Dursley's worldview. Petunia, driven by jealousy and fear, raised Dudley with the notion that magic was freakish and unnatural. Vernon reinforced that idea daily. They lavished Dudley with attention and gifts, indulging his every whim while treating Harry as an unwanted burden. Dudley was never given a chance to form his own thoughts until the Dementor attack shattered the illusion of normalcy that protected him. It was that moment, when the Dementors closed in on him, draining him of joy and filling him with fear, that everything began to unravel. For the first time, Dudley experienced the darkness Harry had faced repeatedly. And crucially, it was Harry who saved him. The very boy Dudley had mocked, punched, and belittled stood between him and the soulless kiss of the Dementor. That experience, terrifying and raw, broke through the layers of learned cruelty. After that night, in Order of the Phoenix, things began to shift. We don't see much of Dudley after that, but the small details matter. He doesn't harass Harry again. There's no more petty violence. Rowling hints at quiet reflection. The Dudley who arrives in Deathly Hallows is still uncomfortable, still far from eloquent, but he is no longer cruel. He is reaching out, stumbling towards something resembling human decency. It's worth noting how significant it is that Rowling gives this transformation no big spotlight. She resists melodrama. The scene isn't bathed in a golden light. There is no applause. That is exactly what makes it powerful. Real change doesn't always come with trumpet sounds. Sometimes it comes with a quiet sentence, a held-out hand, and a shared glance. Harry's response is just as telling. He's caught off guard. He doesn't offer a grand reply or embrace his cousin. He simply shakes the hand and the moment passes, but that silence is loaded. Harry, who spent 11 years under the Dursleys' roof, being treated like vermin, is offered a sliver of acknowledgement. It's not forgiveness, it's not friendship. But it's enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the cycle of hatred can be broken. In a story filled with epic battles and legendary heroism, this one moment between two boys from the same house speaks volumes. Dudley's evolution reminds us that even those raised in ignorance can learn to see the world differently. He doesn't become a hero, he doesn't need to, he becomes a better human, and that's enough. Dudley's character arc is a subtle mirror to the larger theme of Deathly Hallows, the idea that war, trauma, and truth change people. Just as Draco Malfoy wavers in his loyalty to Voldemort, just as Kreacher finds new dignity in serving Harry, just as even Snape's past reveals heartbreaking complexity, Dudley becomes a symbol of quiet transformation. His change isn't heroic, but it is honest. The phrase, "I don't think you're a waste of space," is not just about Harry. It is also about Dudley beginning to reject the narrative he was raised on. In those words, he is admitting that maybe, just maybe, his parents were wrong, that he was wrong, that Harry was never the problem. And in return, Rowling grants him something very few characters in real life or fiction receive: redemption without fanfare. No magical glow surrounds him. He doesn't accompany Harry to the final battle, but in his small gesture he becomes something rare in literature, a minor character who changes in a believable, grounded and deeply human way. We often talk about Severus Snape's redemption, about Draco's hesitation, about Percy Weasley returning. to the right side, but Dudley's evolution is quieter and perhaps more relatable. He is not powerful, he is not wise, but he begins to think for himself. That is a kind of magic all its own. J.K. Rowling once said in an interview that she wrote a deleted scene in which Dudley and Harry kept in contact as adults, sending cards at Christmas, a kind of distant civility. It never made it into the final books, but the idea lingers. It suggests that the moment on Privet Drive had consequences beyond that day, that maybe, over time, Dudley and Harry could move past their history, not erase it, but outgrow it. And what better way to honour the theme of Deathly Hallows than to recognise this? In a book about letting go, about moving forward, about choosing what kind of person you want to be, Dudley's thank you is not a minor moment. It is a climax of a different sort, one without spells but full of meaning. It also serves as a reminder to the reader, change is possible. Even the most flawed people can surprise you. Even those who hurt you might someday offer you their hand, not in friendship perhaps, but in acknowledgement. In the end, Harry takes that hand, and he does so with grace, because accepting that gesture is its own kind of magic. So, as we remember, the major battles, the great sacrifices, and the names etched into Hogwarts' stone, let us also remember this, that one summer morning, Dudley Dursley stopped on the threshold, turned to the cousin he had wronged for years, and said thank you. It was the final spell cast in the house at number 4, Privet Drive, and it was perhaps the most powerful of them all. Number 24. Aberforth secretly aided the Order. Aberforth Dumbledore had always been a figure cast in shadows. For years, readers saw him as little more than a grumpy bartender at the Hog's Head Inn, gruff, disinterested, and seemingly disconnected from the greater struggles that enveloped the wizarding world. He was mentioned in the Goblet of Fire as the barman whose establishment was known for its shady clientele and questionable hygiene. It was the place where Hagrid had let slip information about dragons, but little more was offered. He was an odd contrast to his brilliant older brother Albus, eccentric, respected, powerful, and at the heart of nearly every major resistance movement. Aberforth, in contrast, looked more like a man who had stepped away from the war entirely. And yet, the events of the Deathly Hallows quietly turned this perception on its head. Hidden in the final chapters of the saga was a revelation. Aberforth had not only been watching events unfold, he had been directly involved in shaping them. He had risked his safety, used his connection to Ariana's portrait, and opened a secret passage that ultimately allowed Harry, Ron, and Hermione to return to Hogwarts at its darkest hour. Aberforth had in his own way become a quiet sentinel of resistance. This was not the kind of flashy, wand-waving heroism that readers might expect, but it was no less brave. This act was more than an isolated moment of bravery. It was a statement of character. Aberforth had lost almost everything, his sister, his faith in his brother, and possibly his belief in grand causes, but he never gave up on doing what was right. His rescue of the trio marked a turning point not only for the story, but for the audience's understanding of the man himself. When Harry knocks on the door of the Hog's Head, soaked and desperate, it is Aberforth who lets them in. Not with a warm smile, but with grim determination. "I'm not interested in what happened between you and Albus," he says. "I'm interested in keeping you alive." Through the portrait of Ariana, a powerful and intimate symbol of both family trauma and hidden resilience, Aberforth had maintained a connection to the heart of Hogwarts, a school that had long since fallen under the tyrannical gaze of the Carrows and, indirectly, Lord Voldemort. That secret passage was more than a physical route into the castle. It was a lifeline. Students like Neville Longbottom, who had become the leader of the underground resistance, used it to escape the brutality of the Death Eater regime. Aberforth kept them fed, kept them safe, and never sought recognition. This level of quiet sacrifice is rare in the series. Most characters who aid Harry do so in moments drenched with drama, Snape with his memories, Dobby with his death, or Sirius with his rebellion, but Aberforth? He offers help and then recedes. His actions do not end with opening the tunnel. He sends food, he offers shelter, he lies to protect those who passed through his pub. He, in effect, became a shadow general in a hidden war. The readers were given only fragments of Aberforth's past across the books. He was the one who broke his brother's nose at Ariana's funeral. He was the one who cared for her deeply, perhaps more than anyone. And it was he who had never forgiven Albus for the way things had turned out. This context makes his aid all the more poignant. He did not help Harry out of duty to Albus. He helped in spite of him. That, in truth, makes his allegiance even more powerful. What many readers missed in their first rush through the Deathly Hallows was how critical Aberforth's actions were. Without that hidden tunnel, Harry would not have returned to Hogwarts. Without Aberforth's sanctuary, Neville and the DA might not have survived to fight. The entire battle could have looked very different. In the grand architecture of J.K. Rowling's narrative, Aberforth was a keystone, quiet, unassuming, but essential. The tunnel he revealed was not simply a secret passage. It was a connection to a past marred by loss. Ariana's portrait served as a painful reminder of what had been taken from them. And yet Aberforth chose to use that memory as a source of strength. He could have closed himself off entirely, turned bitter, ignored the call, but instead he allowed Ariana to become the gatekeeper to hope. This use of her portrait, the girl caught between two worlds, was one of the most emotionally charged symbols in the entire book. When Harry first entered the Hog's Head that night, he did not expect to find an ally, but Aberforth not only welcomed him, he challenged him. He questioned the wisdom of following Albus's plan. "You're sure, are you, that my brother knew what he was doing?" he asked. And in doing so he voiced the very doubts that many readers had carried through the series. Yet, despite those doubts, Aberforth still helped. He stood on the right side even when he no longer believed in the myth of his brother. There is a deep emotional truth in Aberforth's choice. He was a man who had been failed by his family, broken by grief, and overshadowed by a figure the world revered. But he did not let that stop him from doing good. His courage was not born from faith in a cause, but from love. Love for his sister, and perhaps a reluctant love for the world she never had a chance to live in. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Aberforth fought. He did not stay behind the bar. He emerged, wand in hand, ready to stand beside those who had been brave enough to return. It's a moment too easily overlooked. When giants roamed the grounds and spells flew through the air, Aberforth Dumbledore, a man who had once been dismissed as a drunk, became a protector. He survived the battle. He watched others fall, and yet he remained. There was no grand speech, no ceremony, but readers should remember that when the final victory came, it stood on the shoulders of unlikely heroes like Aberforth. His pub, once a symbol of disconnection and avoidance, became a haven. The Hog's Head became the silent headquarters of the final push against evil. The narrative chose not to highlight him with the same fanfare given to others, but perhaps that is fitting. Aberforth never wanted glory. He distrusted it. He knew too well what the pursuit of greatness had cost his family. In many ways he was a mirror to his brother. Where Albus sought power and philosophy, Aberforth clung to simplicity and moral instinct. And in the end, it was Aberforth who preserved something tangible: lives, truth, loyalty. His story is also a tragedy. Ariana died under mysterious, violent circumstances. The Dumbledore brothers never truly reconciled. Aberforth's resentment never turned to forgiveness, but even without forgiveness he chose action over apathy. That choice is a powerful one, and it speaks volumes about the strength it takes to keep fighting when belief has faltered. It is telling that even in his bitterness, Aberforth never crossed over to the other side. He did not fall prey to cynicism. He did not betray. Many in the wizarding world folded in the face of Voldemort's rise. Aberforth stood firm. That in itself is an act of immense bravery. When readers consider the heroes of the Second Wizarding War, they often think of Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Neville. They may think of McGonagall, Snape, or even Molly Weasley, but Aberforth's name rarely enters the conversation. And yet without him, the final chapter could not have played out as it did. He did not need to be the chosen one. He simply chose to help. In one of the final moments they share, Aberforth says to Harry, "You're a lot like him, you know." It's unclear whether he means Albus or James, but perhaps in that moment Aberforth saw in Harry the possibility of healing, of making better choices, and perhaps helping Harry was Aberforth's way of doing something Albus never could, offering Ariana peace. The readers should revisit that scene through Ariana's portrait with new eyes. It is not only a magical device, it is a grave, a memory, a cry for redemption, and it is Aberforth who answers. That act, small as it may seem in the storm of war, is one of the purest in the book. It is rooted in grief, and yet it carries hope. So when we return to the bar in Hogsmeade and see that old man polishing glasses with a sour look and a goat behind the counter, we now understand that the man behind the grizzled beard carried a story deeper than most. He was a soldier in the quietest of ways. He was the one who stayed behind when so many had run. He had lost more than most and still chose the side of the living. The story of Aberforth is the story of unseen sacrifice, of battles fought in silence, of goodness hidden beneath scars. It is a reminder that heroism doesn't always wear a cloak. Sometimes it wears an apron, serves fire whiskey, and sometimes that is enough to save the world. Number 25, Hermione fights for house elf rights. In the shadow of dragons, Triwizard tasks, and the return of Voldemort, an overlooked revolution quietly took root within the pages of The Goblet of Fire. While readers were swept away by the danger and spectacle, Hermione Granger, seemingly in the background, began a battle of her own, a quieter, subtler one. She created the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, SPEW, a movement so small and ridiculed that many dismissed it as comic relief. But Rowling planted this narrative thread deliberately. Hermione's quest was not whimsical idealism. It was an act of defiance against centuries of magical tradition, deeply woven with messages of freedom, dignity, and social justice. Hermione's founding of SPEW happened not during a moment of quiet reflection, but in the bustling chaos of the Quidditch World Cup, after she witnessed the abuse of a house elf firsthand. The Ministry's treatment of Winky, Barty Crouch Sr.'s house elf, was humiliating and dehumanizing. Winky was punished for something she could not control and cast aside like a faulty tool. For Hermione, who had grown up in the Muggle world and was unused to such normalized servitude, the moment was jarring. It lit a spark in her, a fierce and urgent need to challenge the system. She didn't have allies in this fight. Ron Weasley laughed at her. Even Harry, often open-minded, shrugged off the idea. "You won't make them happy, Hermione. They're used to it," he told her. But Hermione was undeterred. She sat in the common room, weaving tiny hats and socks and hiding them under piles of Gryffindor laundry, in the hopes that unsuspecting elves would be freed by accident. It was a tender, almost childlike gesture, but behind it burned righteous indignation. She refused to be complicit in a society that ignored injustice simply because it was comfortable. The narrative gave her no reward, no applause, no great moment of triumph. Her activism was met with laughter, awkward silences, and condescension. Yet Hermione persisted not because she expected glory, but because she believed that doing what is right mattered more than doing what is easy. In this, she became one of the truest moral compasses of the series, not because she was always correct, but because she was willing to confront hard truths alone. House elves had long been regarded as joyful slaves in the wizarding world, a view Rowling intentionally crafted to make readers uncomfortable. Their happiness in servitude mirrored real-world arguments used to justify oppression, that certain people or beings were meant for subjugation. Dobby stood out as a glaring exception. When freed, he did not wither but flourished. He found work at Hogwarts not as a slave, but as a paid employee, choosing his conditions. It was a breakthrough moment, and yet it was Hermione who had always believed others like him could thrive in freedom. Kreacher, introduced in Order of the Phoenix as a bitter, venomous presence, initially seemed to validate Ron's dismissal of Hermione's cause. But even Kreacher, twisted by years of isolation and contempt, began to change when treated with respect. It was Harry's change in attitude toward him, learning from Dumbledore's reminder to show compassion, that turned Kreacher into a loyal and capable ally in Deathly Hallows. But the roots of this shift were buried in Hermione's stubborn insistence that even the lowest, the vilest, could change if given dignity. "It's people like you, Ron, who prop up rotten systems just by going along with them," she said. Rowling used Hermione's voice to challenge readers who may have laughed too. The quiet brilliance of SPEW is that it holds a mirror to systemic injustice. It dares to ask why some traditions are held sacred when they are, in fact, harmful. It calls out complicity. And it does so through the most bookish, rule-abiding character in the trio, reminding us that radical change doesn't always wear the face of rebellion. It can also come from knit hats and stubborn determination. In the bowels of the Hogwarts kitchens, Hermione discovered an entire population of invisible workers, cheerful and smiling, yet conditioned never to question their roles. When Harry and Ron followed her there, they were stunned to find dozens of house elves bustling in a vast, underground kitchen, preparing feasts without recognition or rest. "They get paid in food and shelter. That's not freedom, that's bondage," Hermione insisted. But even the elves themselves seemed baffled by her concern. The brilliance of Rowling's writing was not in the ease of Hermione's victory, but in the fact that she met resistance from the very people she wanted to help. This is the central tragedy and complexity of Hermione's crusade. She couldn't solve the problem by herself. The house elves didn't see themselves as slaves. Their cultural indoctrination was too deep. Winky, even after being freed, wept endlessly for having failed her master. The reader, too, is left with unease. Was Hermione forcing her ideals onto a group that didn't want them? Or was she, in fact, the only one who saw the truth? Hermione's struggle paralleled many real-world activists who faced ridicule, alienation, and resistance, even from those they sought to uplift. Rowling did not make her instantly successful. Instead, she allowed her to fail, to grow frustrated, to be laughed at. This was not to diminish her importance, but to honor the reality that social change is neither easy nor instant. Rowling showed that sometimes progress begins in a whisper, not a roar. There's also a layered irony in Hermione's activism. For all her intelligence, she was only 14, her methods were naive, hiding clothes and assuming elves would want them. But her heart was in the right place. And though the series didn't let her liberate the elves in grand fashion, her actions planted seeds. She shifted perspectives. She made Harry think differently about Kreacher. She made Dumbledore, already a sympathizer, more vocal in his support. She prepared readers to accept that change is a long game. In Half-Blood Prince, the thread of SPW fades into the background. Hermione's focus shifts to more immediate threats, but that silence is telling. It shows how easily important causes are buried under the urgency of war, how even the most committed must sometimes turn to survival. Yet the echo of her cause lingers. Kreacher's transformation is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that empathy can break the cycle of hatred. "Kreacher will go and find Mundungus," he croaked with a bow, his voice no longer spitting venom but carrying quiet resolve. And so, The small society that began with parchment, quills, and indignation at the back of the Gryffindor common room subtly reshaped the narrative. Hermione taught readers that courage isn't just fighting dragons. It's standing alone in a room full of friends and saying, "This is wrong." It's knitting socks for creatures who might never thank you. It's doing the hard work of social justice without expecting a reward. There is a sharp contrast between SPEW and the rest of the Triwizard arc. Where dragons and mazes gave Harry glory and scars, SPEW gave Hermione scorn. Yet her battle was no less real. She fought a system built on silence, on collective agreement that some beings simply did not matter. Her fight was, in its way, against Voldemort's logic, the belief that some lives are worth more than others. Rowling did not forget Hermione's mission. In Deathly Hallows, the fruits of that labour begin to show. Harry, now grown in wisdom, treats Kreacher with decency. It is that act, not magic, not force, that wins Kreacher's loyalty and helps them find the Locket Horcrux. The moment is almost invisible, yet deeply symbolic. The war was not just against dark wizards, but against the darker truths of their own world. It is not hard to imagine that after the books ended, Hermione continued her work. Rowling has hinted that she went on to transform the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. But even without that confirmation, her early activism foreshadowed it. She was never content with comfort. Her passion for fairness ran deeper than any spell. The dismissal of SPEW by readers mirrors the dismissal Hermione faced in the books. It's uncomfortable, almost meta. Readers often laughed along with Ron, rolled their eyes, and skimmed past those scenes. But that was the point. Rowling was not just writing about house elves. She was writing about us, about our willingness to ignore uncomfortable truths, to avoid seeing injustice when it does not affect us personally. Even Fred and George mocked Hermione, charming hats to insult house elves instead of freeing them. Yet this antagonism revealed more than just comic relief. It revealed the insidious nature of systemic oppression, how even the kindest characters can perpetuate cruelty by refusing to challenge the status quo. When viewed through this lens, SPEW becomes one of the most courageous acts in the entire series. Not because it changed the world overnight, but because it existed at all. In a world where even magic bowed to tradition, Hermione dared to ask why. Her rebellion wasn't loud, but it was potent. The power of Hermione's storyline lies in its realism. Not all fights end in victory. Not all ideals are appreciated in their time, but every act of resistance chips away at the wall. Hermione didn't need an army. She needed only her voice, her conviction, and a pair of knitting needles. She was, in every way, a revolutionary. And the revolution began with socks.